Good morning. Thank you all for coming today. I'm Chris Daniel, Faculty Professional Development Manager here in the Instructional Development Center, Design Center. We've changed that for the Office of eCampus Learning. And with us presenting today is Dr. Jennifer Fairchild, a longtime friend of both me and the department and a professor in the School of Communication. She's been teaching online since 2013. Is that right?
Yes, for eCampus since 2013. Yeah.
That's a good long time. So she brings a wealth of experience. And if communications isn't one of the pivotal aspects of instruction and learning, I don't know what is. So appreciate your wealth of experience you're bringing to us today. And I'm going to make you co-presenter. So let me do that real quick. And as soon as that happens, I'll have you take it away.
All right, I'm going to share my screen. All right, so you guys can see, hopefully, my PowerPoint. Good. All right. Well, I do want to welcome you to this session on building community and developing immediacy in the online classroom. And before we go too far, I want to give special thanks to my colleague, Dr. Laurel Schwartz, because she helped me and she contributed to this presentation today. So without her, I would not be able to share some of this information. I wanted to be sure and thank her before we got started. So our goals for today, we're going to define community in the classroom and provide strategies to help you build a positive course experience and develop immediacy in the online classroom. As Chris said, I am Jennifer Fairchild. I have worked at EKU since 2007. I started teaching online classes for what was then called our Department of Communication in 2008. We were not yet affiliated with eCampus, but once we started developing online classes for eCampus, I did start teaching there in 2013. So I have been doing this for a little while, and I hope that what I have to share with you today will be helpful. I don't think I'm an expert, but I do think I have some tips that will help us all develop and foster community in the online classroom. So today we're going to identify strategies to build community in the online classroom, and we will define immediacy and discuss strategies that we can use to develop immediacy in the online classroom as well. Most of what I'm going to share with you today in my presentation, in addition to my personal experience, will be coming from these following two books. The books are called How Learning Works, 7 Research-Based Principles for Smart Teaching, and Communication for Teachers. These are great resources that I recommend that you can review at your own time as well. So first, I want to talk about classroom climate. As educators, we are mostly concerned with fostering intellectual and creative skills in our students, but we must recognize that students are not only intellectual, but they are also social and emotional beings, and that these dimensions interact within the classroom climate to influence learning and performance. Sometimes emotional and social processes hamper students' ability to engage productively with the material and to learn. So what does this have to do with classroom climate or developing community in the classroom? Although we cannot control the development process, the good news is if we understand it, we can shape the classroom climate in ways that are developmentally appropriate. And if we are connecting the classroom climate to student learning, many studies have shown that the classroom climate we create has implications for student performance and learning. A negative classroom climate can hinder students' learning process, but a positive classroom climate can energize students' learning. One principle we need to remember is that students' current level of development interacts with the social, emotional, and intellectual climate of the course to impact their learning. While we are not life coaches, we are not counselors, and I think we should not assume those roles, we do need to remember that we should consider the implications of student development for teaching and learning so we can create more productive learning environments. Just as we need to consider student development holistically, we also need to consider the various facets of course climate that influence student learning. Climate is influenced by many factors that we will discuss today. A common and simplistic way of thinking about course climate is in binary terms. Climate is either good, it's inclusive, it's productive, it's positive, or it's bad, it's chilly or marginalizing. Course climate is affected by the tone of the class, how the instructor communicates with students, and the range of inclusion and comfort that students experience. Climate can be influenced by the kind of language we use in the classroom. Is it encouraging language or is it demotivating? Especially in the way negative feedback is offered. Is the feedback constructive and focused on the task, or is it demeaning and focused on the person? Is there something inherent in what we teach, not how, that can influence course climate? For example, in the readings we choose, in the examples we use in our online class, in the language we choose to use in our class. For students who are still developing their sense of identity, purpose, and competence, some of these messages can be powerful. Is there a way in your classroom that you can include multiple perspectives on the same issue? Now I would like to discuss a number of strategies that the research suggests may help you encourage student development and create a positive and productive climate. Of course, this list isn't all inclusive, but it is a great start. And this is information from those two sources I showed you a little bit earlier. First, make uncertainty safe. Validate different viewpoints, even unpopular viewpoints. Explicitly let students know that part of critical thinking is to embrace complexity rather than oversimplify matters. Explain that even though it might seem frustrating, the point of classroom discussion is not to reach consensus, but to enrich everybody's thinking. Second, examine your assumptions about students. Because assumptions influence the way we interact with students, which in turn impacts their learning, we need to uncover and at times question those assumptions, because these assumptions can result in behaviors that are unintentionally alienating and can affect climate and students' developing sense of identity. Third, reduce anonymity. Make an effort to learn students' names, provide opportunities for students to learn each other's names, and invite students to attend your virtual office hours. Fourth, model inclusive language, behavior, and attitudes. If you model inclusiveness in your classroom, it can be a powerful learning experience. Be careful not to use the generic he, for example. Ask student what their pronouns are and use them correctly. Feeling included and not marginalized is essential for the development of a positive sense of identity. Fifth, use the syllabus in the first day, the first module, or the first week in your online class to establish the course climate. Your students will form impressions about you on the first day of class. So set the tone that you want to permeate this semester. Think through how to introduce yourself and the course. How will you balance establishing your competence and authority with coming across as supportive and approachable? What kind of icebreaker could you use to help students get to know each other and become comfortable with you and the class while engaging with the content meaningfully? Now we know what community is, and we've heard some strategies on establishing it. Let's talk more in depth about developing community in the online classroom. How can you build community? You should set course expectations. Ask the students for feedback on how the class is going. You can use weekly check-in forms in the online class. Using a Google form is an easy and free way to do this. Create opportunities for the students to interact with the assessments, but also to interact with each other. According to an article from Yale Academic Continuity, there are two categories for building community in the online classroom. They are either considered social or structural ways to build community. For example, for social, you can welcome your students into the online space. Normalize that we are all still figuring out how to utilize our online space together, and that's okay. For the structural category, for example, you can connect your material with students' lived experience. This is especially important in the online classroom, as many students we have in the online classroom are non-traditional students or adult learners who have many lived experiences to share with you and can apply those experiences to the online course material. Now, I mentioned Dr. Schwartz and the work she did to help me as we were creating this presentation. She and I created a survey that we shared on our social media accounts. We asked alumni from our respective programs to tell us what their EKU professors did to create community in the classroom. She is in public health, I'm in communication, so we had a variety of answers for this student survey. Okay, the first question we asked was, what did your professor do to build community in the classroom? The responses we received, they welcomed questions, they had us work in groups or do group activities, they made everyone feel welcome, and they encouraged participation. The next question we asked, what are specific examples of how your professor made you feel connected in class? They remembered details we've shared in class. They used those examples and topics related to our interests. They validated us. They put us in small groups where we conducted interactive assignments. They kept us accountable for our work, but they also showed that they cared. They helped us with honest discussions. And finally, they asked how I was, and they really listened to the answer. So these are easy things that you can do from these specific examples of feedback that we received. You can create a Google form for your online class where you have students fill out an introduce yourself survey. You can ask questions on that survey where you get to know students and use that information later in class discussions. I do this often. I'll ask students, what are 3 things you know more about than the average person? And then I'll try to incorporate their likes and their interest into our class discussions later in the semester. You should always validate your students. Never put them down. Tell them when they do well in your class and let them know that you are proud of them. All right, the next question that we asked, if you had one suggestion to help your professor build community in the classroom, what would it be? All right, here's some answers we received. Help students find common ground. Continue those group projects. We often think that students hate group projects, but the feedback we receive shows that it's very helpful for them to build community, work together, and get to know each other. Have that open discussion. Interact with us outside of class. And there are ways you can do this in the online classroom. We'll talk about those later. Don't take yourself too seriously and use icebreakers to help us get to know you and to get to know each other. All right, now that we've discussed these community building strategies, I would like to talk about immediacy and ways you can develop it in the online classroom. I hope you will find that the discussion of immediacy dovetails nicely with those community building strategies I've just mentioned. We know that the challenge of keeping our students engaged and motivated is common across grade levels, subject matter, and all types of institutions and courses. Online courses, however, present a special concern. With students and faculty in contact only via the internet, several new challenges arise. Without face-to-face contact, faculty are not able to pick up nonverbal cues from students that can indicate that they are disengaged, frustrated, or unenthusiastic about the course material. Faculty also cannot share their emotions easily. They may find it harder to express enthusiasm, encouragement, or concern. The anonymous feeling of the online environment can make it easier for students to withdraw, to participate minimally, or sadly, sometimes they disappear completely from the course. On the other hand, we know that there are several advantages to the online environment that make it easier to engage students. The self-paced nature of online courses allows students to fit the work time into their schedule. Those who prefer to log into the class at midnight are free to do so. Intrinsically motivated students can be engaged with quizzes and interactive features that offer instant feedback. The web offers tremendous possibilities for flexibility, interactivity, and creativity. It is possible to create many types of engaging experiences. So although there are some challenges associated with online learning, we know that it's possible to develop and foster a sense of community in your online classroom. Perhaps some of the behaviors that you are using in the face-to-face classroom can be modified to create this sense of community in the online classroom too. So to start this portion of our discussion, I want to introduce some communication research. I would be remiss as a communication scholar if I didn't do that today. So those of us in the communication discipline, we've long used the term immediacy to describe our teaching behavior. But what does immediacy mean? Immediacy means psychological closeness. Immediacy first appeared in the face-to-face educational modality. Social psychologist Albert Mehrabian has been credited with defining the concept of immediacy in terms of his principle of immediacy, which states, and I quote, "People are drawn toward persons and things they like, evaluate highly, and prefer, and they avoid or move away from things they dislike, evaluate negatively, or do not prefer," end quote. Immediacy relates to approach and avoidance behaviors and can be thought of as perceived distance between people. Mehrabian defined it as that degree in which communication behaviors facilitate physical or psychological closeness in interpersonal communication. Gorham broadened that definition to include any verbal interaction that increased the psychological closeness between teachers and students. This concept includes communication behaviors, reducing the perceived distance between people. If the student manages to feel psychologically close to their teacher, this translates into teacher-student immediacy. Immediacy is a perception of physical or psychological closeness. Over the past 25 years, research on immediacy has revealed its connection to a number of important learning outcomes. Immediacy in the classroom does not mean you are a pushover. It does not mean that you let students do whatever they want. Instead, immediacy means be approachable. Immediacy can increase affect towards you and your class. If students like you and your class, then they will be motivated to pay attention to what you teach. Information that has not been attended to cannot be learned. So immediacy helps our students learn and helps us build rapport with our students. Mehrabian, widely considered the creator of immediacy theory, defines it as the degree in which select communication behaviors improve physical or psychological closeness in interpersonal communication. It can have verbal or nonverbal forms. Nonverbal forms of immediacy refer to psychological closeness through physical communication behaviors, like your facial expressions, visual contact, posture, proximity, and touch. On the other hand, verbal forms of immediacy refer to a sense of psychological closeness that's created through your words. For example, using the word us promotes a deeper closeness in relationships and is considered more immediate than using the words you and me. So now that we've discussed the term immediacy, I want to talk about how immediacy applies to instructional behavior in the online classroom. Immediacy is that perception. I've said that several times. I want to reiterate the perception of physical and psychological closeness between communicators. We can see why studying immediacy would apply to the classroom. Immediacy is positively correlated with student affect and effective learning. That can be in many classes, across cultures, even in large classes, and even when the workload demands are high. It's positively correlated with student cognitive learning, perceived instructor competence, caring, and trustworthiness, positive student evaluations, student state motivation, interpersonal attraction, all three forms of attraction, task, physical, and social attraction, perceived teacher assertiveness and responsiveness, and student attendance and participation. In an online modality, this is achieved by the word selection of written messages found in our emails and in our work and our discussion forums. Also, the speed of a teacher's response to students through the various electronic communication means contribute to creating a sense of online closeness between those students and teacher, regardless of the many miles that might be separating them. In case to yourself, okay, good research. Thanks for sharing that, Jennifer. But what does this have to do with me or my online class specifically? Here you go. What's in it for me? I align teacher immediacy with online teacher presence. The literature also indicates that the instructional design of online courses is paramount to the instructor's ability to facilitate high teacher immediacy behaviors. Student immediacy should also be encouraged, but the instructor has to model that communication first. So how do we model that communication? I have several tips I want to share. First, set expectations. Create explicit course and activity goals. Students feel more motivated to put effort into a course that they deem worthwhile. If the course goals are explicitly laid out, students can more accurately judge if they are worthwhile for them. Clearly communicate those work and learning expectations before class begins. Using video is an effective way to do this. Provide study strategy tips from successful students in previous classes. Students love examples. Show me an example of someone who did this assignment well in previous classes. Create a detailed syllabus with assignment information, the format of your class, your course and assignment schedule, and advice for completing work. If possible, link assignments and policies directly from the syllabus so students don't have to search for this information. Keep the course website updated with notifications of units that are opening, closing, or changing. Create a short video to initiate each new activity. This provides a personalized introduction to the work. Use a syllabus survey or a course policies quiz at the beginning of the semester, which can be a gateway to other assignments in your class. Set up a consistent timetable for work each week so that the deadlines in your class are predictable. Log in often to your class, respond quickly to students, and convey genuine enthusiasm. Because so much communication in our online class is done via the typed word, choose your wording to deliberately reach out to students. Start a weekly thread in your class on tips and tricks for my class, where students can post suggestions for their classmates on how to do well with the content and material you're covering. Allow students to develop self-efficacy. Recognize when a student has done a really good job on a task or has dramatically improved on a skill. Ensure an early success for each student and praise it and document it. There are many ways to stay in touch with your students. Aim for frequent and regular contact each week, especially if the student is falling behind. Set up a Facebook page for your course. This can be a separate Facebook account from your personal page, allowing you to keep your personal page independent from your professional one. Encourage personal interactions, and there are definitely ways to do this in your online class. Now, I will say I do most of these things in my online classroom. Some of these I have learned over time from mentors who helped me become the online teacher I am today, such as Dr. Jane Violet from the University of South Carolina at Beaufort. Several of the strategies that I use to this day to develop immediacy in my online classroom came from tips that Dr. Violet gave me when I was first learning to teach online classes at EKU back in 2008. Dr. Violet conducted her dissertation research on immediacy and instructor behaviors that create immediacy, so she's been a great resource for me. And as a reminder, the research indicates over and over again that students who experience high or moderately high immediacy teachers learn more, and they like what they are learning more, and are therefore motivated to apply their learning. However, teachers must be equally clear in their communication. You can't just edutain students. So when we think of immediacy behaviors, we can also think of clarity. Clarity in our teaching complements our immediacy behaviors. I am going to share some things that I have been commended for doing in my classroom by my colleagues who are instructional designers. They tell me that these behaviors are not always typical of online instructors, but they are really easy behaviors for all of us to implement. If you can implement some of these behaviors in your online classroom, I bet you will see community in your online classroom too. Students need to know where they have been in the class to understand where they are going. I work with the talented instructional designers at the IDC here at EKU and with eCampus to make sure my class is clear and concise and personalized to who I am as a teacher. For example, I create a welcome video to the class, which gives students a chance to hear and see me even before the class has started. I open my class early in Blackboard, and I allow students to venture around in it to ensure that they can see my expectations for them, but also so they can ask me questions about anything that may confuse them or concern them prior to the class starting. Since my class always involves public speaking, I get several questions related to the speaking assignment, as it is an area of concern for many of my students. Next, once the class starts, I do weekly announcements, reminding students of the daily task they must complete. I typically follow these announcements with emails, not daily emails, but a few emails a week, to remind students of information they may need to help them decipher the material or what we are reading that week. Another thing that Dr. Violet taught me to do early in my career, it's something that students always respond positively to, is called This Week in Review. At the end of each week, I remind students via email what we've learned. I will hit the highlights of some of our reading. I will reiterate the main concepts and learning goals for the chapter or the units or the modules. Then I preview to what we are going to learn next week. I give them a link to a TED Talk or a YouTube video that previews something that we'll be discussing in the next module. The goal is to get them excited about the material we will cover. Since I teach communication, I'm always looking for ways that the concepts we discuss in an academic environment appear in popular culture. And I always share these interesting tidbits with students via email or classroom announcements when I find something worthwhile to share. So the goal of this is to get the students excited about communication and what we are studying, and to see how it applies to real life situations, since communication is everywhere. Whenever there is a big test or project coming up in the class, I send students announcements and emails with some information that I want to share with them, tips that will help them succeed. I rarely tell students to check the module, because if they are emailing me, most likely they have already checked the module and they had trouble locating a piece of information, or they have questions about an assignment. So I have found saying check the module isn't very helpful. Since tone is so important in an email, I have to be very aware of my word choice when composing an email to a student. So many of the emails I receive from my students start with, "I am so sorry to bug you," but I always reply to them and say, "You are not bugging me. I am your professor. I am here to help you learn. Answering your questions on email is part of my job." So I hope they know that I don't feel like they are bothering me. With online students, I know they have anxiety about not being able to see me in person regularly, so I know that it's important that I am almost religious about checking my email. I tell my students that I will always reply to their email inquiries within 24 hours or less. I usually set a private, personal goal. I don't publish this, but I say that I'll reply within 12 hours, if at all possible. Being responsive to student emails is one way that I can relieve some of their anxiety about the class and develop a sense of community to show them that we are all in this together. I participate in all the discussion boards. I tell my students I would never ask them to answer a question in a discussion board that I would not feel comfortable answering myself. By showing them that we are all in this class together, it reduces that wall between me as the professor, the person who gives the grades, and the students. And according to Faculty Focus, establishing the tone of the community through class correspondence, discussion board replies, and assessment feedback is very important. Often, this requires you to give students some of yourself. You may want to share an anecdote about your weekend, or a link to something online that you found interesting. When students are comfortable with you, they are more comfortable learning, participating, and sharing in the learning environment, which harkens back to that previous discussion of immediacy. Faculty Focus also suggests encouraging interaction. Classroom interactions happen by proximity in the brick and mortar classroom, but in the online classroom, you have to be more deliberate about student to student and student to faculty exchanges. In the online classroom, you could use synchronous sessions, communal discussion boards, group projects, student presentations, and peer review groups. Out of the classroom, you can help create study groups for your students and establish crowdsourced notes to help them study. Like all interactions, these should be meaningful, relevant, and theorized to avoid confusion or resentment that can sometimes result from group interactions. When done successfully, however, these interactions create not only a community of learners, but can also become lasting friendships long after the class is over. Build outside class spaces. Unlike the brick and mortar classroom, online classrooms can feel all-encompassing, lacking that traditional space and time borders that demarcate the classroom. This often means that there is no before or after class time when much of that community building often occurs. In an online course, you have to consciously build in these outside spaces that are free from content delivery and assessment. Make water cooler or student virtual lounges or cafe discussion boards where the class can talk about current events and common interest. I've done this in all of my classes, and it does work well when the students can interact with each other. Watch a virtual event together and discuss it afterwards. Deliberately create social moments. Acknowledge that the social part is a fundamental aspect of education too. Bring the outside in. Paradoxically, online courses can also feel compartmentalized and isolated from the wider campus community. In our courses, we need to remind students that they are a part of a large campus culture. Post announcements about events that happen on campus. Assign attendance at webinars or live streaming events for course credit. Encourage them to take part in campus organizations that are especially friendly to distance and continuing education students. Explain how to access student support and resources. As possible, you might be the only touchstone to campus. Faculty members must be ambassadors for the college community. By being deliberate, consistent, and relentless, we can build communities in our online courses that help students connect with not only the course material, but with each other. And by working to create those relationships, we can turn those "I'm sorry to bother you" emails into "I'm glad I have someone to reach out to." And I want to thank Faculty Focus for a lot of that information that's very helpful. I also informally surveyed some of my colleagues who are my Facebook friends. So if we're Facebook friends, you probably saw this posted on my wall. I have teacher friends, not just at EKU, I have them near and far. Many of them shared articles on my Facebook wall, so you can see those there. But one of my colleagues who teaches in Texas, Laura Marachna, shared a very cool idea that I want to share with you. This is how she uses immediacy in her class. I thought this was a great example. She says, I use a graphic syllabus and a slide of pictures about myself to establish credibility, not just as a scholar, but as a human and technologically adept. And here I just took a screenshot of her graphic syllabus. Of course, if you were in her class, all of the links on here would be live links. And you can see she has her information about the class, how to reach her, those kinds of things, how to get help. But her graphic syllabus shows a lot of the things that she's interested in, how she spends her free time outside of class. And I think it is so important that we show our students we're people too. We're not just the robot teaching your class. We have family, we have friends, we have personalities, we have hobbies. So I love this idea of a graphic syllabus to establish immediacy very early on in your class. All right, so now you've heard from me. You've heard some survey responses from our EKU alumni. You've gotten tips from my colleagues who are both near and far. So now I would like to ask you, what tips do you have to share with us? What things work for you to help you create immediacy, clarity, or to build community in your online courses? If anybody would like to share, please do so. I'm not so good at monitoring the chat, but you can unmute, or Chris can unmute. If you have any questions you want to ask or anything that you would like to share, please do.
You know, one of the things I kept thinking about and realized that you presented so many tips here. Most of the instructional designers, if not all of us, can help plug folks in to the specifics of how to make something happen, how to operationalize something in the course. But I have a general question, Jennifer, if it's okay.
Sure.
What do you think the pain points for these implementing these things for the faculty are? Do you think it's a time constraint issue? Because I think there's an overwhelming willingness, but I think that there are a lot of pain points with instructors, and how can we help them with that, or recognize what those might be?
Yes, I think right now, especially where we are in our 5th semester of teaching during a pandemic, I think most of us might be more exhausted than we realize. So I think you're totally right. The willingness is there. And what I like to tell people is, I gave you a lot of tips, probably, 30 plus tips that you can implement. If you can't implement all 30, talk to your instructional designer about implementing one.
Right.
Try one, start small, because some of these things really, creating the water cooler or the student lounge, that's not hard, and it's not time consuming. And I don't even have to monitor it much, because it's the students, they're talking to each other. I'll chime in every now and then. But yeah, I think sometimes it's also asking for help. I'm the first to admit I have great ideas, but I need help implementing them. And I always rely heavily on my instructional designer. So I think it might be getting over yourself or over your pride, and just saying, hey, I don't know how to do this. Could we talk? Could you walk me through this? And then once I learn it, I know how to do it, and I can teach other people. So it sort of ebbs and flows that way.
I'd like to amplify what you said about group work. The breakout rooms in Zoom, not only are they applying, what you're trying to get across, in our case, information literacy, finding specific full text, scholarly articles on their topic. But like you said, that social function is built right in, and you can kind of butterfly from group to group to see how they're doing, but it allows them that little bit of contact, especially in previous semesters when we were largely online. I think that was very important for them to have that connection with each other.
Absolutely. I think that the article that was the Yale academic continuity, that was one thing they mentioned a lot, was using Zoom, using breakout rooms, talking about Zoom etiquette. If we're all going to be here for that synchronous online session, how do we behave in the Zoom room? Or if you wanted to go back to your Blackboard class, you could do a discussion board about what's the funniest thing you've ever seen somebody do on Zoom. Because I know some of my friends have instituted no Zoom in the bed policies, or you must have a shirt on when you're in the Zoom. I mean, things that you wouldn't think you'd have to say, but yeah, we have to institute that Zoom etiquette as well. But yeah, the breakout rooms are great, and the group work is built right in.
Another thing that resonated with me too is that, you sort of suggested that we make our online students feel like they are just as much a part of this university as any face-to-face student. And, we're doing more and more every year, I think, to where we're bridging those gaps as much as we can of time and distance. And the library does an exceptional job. One of the first things I see when I go to the library is the get help link at the top. And also there are the hours right there. And one of the hours listings is chat. What's the chat availability for today? Mm-hmm. And that's really powerful when somebody's, coming to the library via that page for resources. And I think more schools and more classes should probably do that. We have Smart Thinking online tutoring, free, no cost tutoring for all our eCampus courses. We need to have those, those elements present in the course. Most of our IDs do a good job of that, but that's just something that resonated with me as well.
Absolutely. I think we're so lucky to have our colleagues at the library who support all of our students, whether you are the brick and mortar kind or the online kind. And that's one thing I've tried to tell my students. I always try to do a commercial for the library. We have library instruction in my class. Like, for example, in April, I'm working with Trina Napier, and she's doing, for my capstone class, a collaborate session. So the students who can, we schedule it during lunchtime, because I have a lot of working adults. So if you can use your lunch hour and come and listen and learn, great. If not, we record that session and collaborate, and then we post it to Blackboard so students can go back and view the recording. I just think that's really important for students to know that the library and all those resources are there for them. Just like with the Knowles Studio, they can go to an online Zoom consultation. You don't have to be the brick and mortar library to get help with the library or the Knowles Studio. And I think we do a great job with helping all of our students. I agree.
Thank you, Jennifer. I think that's one of the challenges that we all have, is making the students realize that we really do mean it when we say we're here to help. And it's not an imposition. I encounter that a lot. I work with the regional campuses and have worked with the online classes for a long time too. And there's always this little bit of surprise that you can just see in their eyes that, well, yeah, I really did mean that I would meet with you, or that I would really do that little bit of extra as a instructor or as a librarian to help you succeed. And that's a continuous kind of challenge that we have.
Yes, and Krista Kimmel and I just redeveloped CMS 100, which is a gen ed. It's the intro class for human communication, and Brad has helped us. So with the entry point, as soon as they get into the class, that intro module, there's library resources. When we talk about finding resources for your outline and for your speech, we have that module as well. And he says that all over the module, I am here to help. Chat with me, email me, so students just have to believe us when we say we are here to help. We really are, and we want to serve them the best we can.
And there are dozens of ways, even beyond the many that you've mentioned, where what we're trying to do is foster that immediacy, that closeness via an approachability, via a professional presence, and via a sort of this, it's more nebulous to me, but this likability concept. Which I think is harder to, I think that kind of shows your heart sometimes a little more than something, but you can practice those communication skills to offer that, even if you're not necessarily by nature a gregarious person. I guess that would be one of my other questions to you is, what about our introverts, of which I'm kind of one, and get my power from kind of contemplative time? I'm not necessarily a great relationship builder in the traditional sense. How would you suggest those folks approach immediacy?
I think that's a great question, because I call myself an extroverted introvert. People are surprised to find, but I need time to recharge too. I like to be at home to read a book, drink a cup of coffee, and I recharge my batteries that way. But I think what it is when we're in the classroom, we get that energy from our students and from what we're doing and our passion for what we're doing, and we get charged up. Even introverts can become extroverts at times. And I know it might be more of a challenge in the online environment, but I have found that using video works really well. And that's something that you and Sam have helped me with a lot, putting those videos in my class so they can see me. I'm not just this nebulous head that's out there. Who is this person teaching my class? She says she's Dr. Fairchild. They see me and they hear me. And I think that's one way to prove to them very early on, hey, I'm a normal person just like you. I like Harry Potter and Taylor Swift, and I love to read, and they learn about who I am and those kinds of things that make me a human. And I think that's a great way for the likability. And we know the likability, sometimes people don't like that term, but it is true. If students like you, they're going to like your material and be more motivated to learn.
Carla says it can also be very helpful to send video responses if a student asks a question that is better demonstrated than written out. So
absolutely.
Lots of great ways to do screencasting, or just put yourself on a quick impromptu video as well. And we use Flipgrid a lot. And of course, everybody's probably familiar with Flipgrid right now. But when you use it sort of as a communications tool, rather than just like, here's my asynchronous message that just happens to be videoed, I find that faculty have loved it when I use it in PD2. That's our online 8-week intensive course for online teaching. And like I'll give an intro, they'll respond. And then when I respond to them, they're invariably surprised. So it's a great tool for that. That's really not that complicated to learn, as opposed to VoiceThread, which is a little more robust, but complicated.
Yes, I just went to a session last week, and I don't know if it's menti.com. Chris, are you familiar with that one?
I'm not, but I'm going to get there.
Yeah, I think it's Mentimeter is what it's called, but I want to say the website was this, and that's, to me, it was very much like Flipgrid. Google that if the website's wrong.
we'll
Don't
check
hold
it
me
out.
to it. But it was the same kind of thing because I went to a demo and the person who was demonstrating the software, he had a quiz about EKU. And then we could in real time answer the questions. We could see who was winning the game. And it seemed very user friendly. And I think there's a free version too.
I love any of those things. The only caveat I have about that stuff is you got to watch when they switch to, a freemium model or a completely paid model. You've got all your stuff in the XYZ basket. Now you've got to pay, X dollars a month to leverage it. That's the only problem I have with any of it. But
Yeah,
I'm going to check that out.
Yeah.
I had that happen with Screencast-O-Matic. That's what I use. And yeah, so I just bit the bullet and paid the $15.
Right.
Yeah, but I totally agree with you about using the video to answer questions. I do that quite a bit as a librarian. It really lends itself, especially when you have a discrete question, how do I do this or whatever, and it gives you that ability to recruit, I guess you could say, as you're going, to get across the fact that you're willing to help and that you are a real person and that you want to do the best you can for them. Plus, I think it kind of does a better job than just giving a student a list of bullet points, a set of steps to go through, that you can, a picture's worth 1,000 words, of course. Them seeing you walk through it, whatever it is you're trying to teach them, I think sticks better
Sure.
as well. So,
And walk through it for them. Hey,
Yes.
Hey, Billy, hey, Susan, hey, whoever. Here's your, this is on the fly. It's rough, but it's for you. And yeah, that makes a big difference. Makes a huge difference.
and that
Yes.
roughness
Yeah.
is a factor as well that humanizes you.
Yes.
When I first started doing this, I was very paranoid. Oh, I coughed, I got to redo it. That kind of stuff makes you real, makes you just like them. So,
That's right.
Absolutely. Mhm.
For
And-
sorry, I was gonna say for expediency on doing those, I've started using Microsoft Stream because it's a recorder and an uploader and a sharer all in one. And it even does the where you can be in the corner. It does the video in video one. You can only record up to 15 minutes on it, but if I'm explaining something quick and simple, I just love because I was a Screencast-O-Matic user, but I've started really switching to Stream because I was having to upload those videos anyway. So now it just all happens all at once. So that saved me a lot of time.
I love Stream, but has IT solved the permissions problem yet, Vicki? Do you know?
What permissions problem are you talking about?
So if you publish something, it's for the entire organization. All of EKU sees it.
No, I mean, yes and no. You have to search for it. It's there. If you're on Stream on EKU, yeah, you can search for it, but it's not like it's getting broadcast out there.
Gotcha.
I look at that as being the same as unlisted,
Uh,
nearly, not quite. I actually think it's more protective than YouTube. I really like it.
oh yeah, it's definitely not public.
Yeah. But no, they haven't quite been able to do that. I haven't tested this out, but one of the things when we're talking about kind of this as a whole, one of my classes right now is piloting using Microsoft Teams. It's an integration that's available through Blackboard Ultra, which is something that you can ask for. It's kind of a newer Blackboard, but there's actually a way that you can have Microsoft Teams, a team automatically set up for you. So I have a class right now that's using Microsoft Teams as their kind of communication tool. They're using it kind of as their discussion board. They used to use GroupMe, but this one has been much easier for students to get on and use, and that's been working really well for them for that.
Thank you. Good.
one other selling point for Teams is that it does better with transcripts than YouTube and other.
Oh yeah, Stream's accuracy is really high.
Mhm.
Yeah. even for folks for whom English is not their first language. I've noticed it being quite high.
It's also really good if you're going to end up using that video in something else, some other kind of project that's not going to be hosted there, you can actually get those transcripts. You can download those transcripts and then upload them to a lot of your other programs that you're using. So you can kind of not necessarily steal those transcripts, but use them. If you're pulling it off of Stream and if your final presentation isn't through Stream, you can actually pull that file and use it in other projects, which is really helpful. PowerPoints, things like that.
So the moral of the story is I need to get better with Stream and Teams. These are two things I need to learn.
They're heading that way for sure. And only because it's something we can support. Like if YouTube breaks or does something, I mean, you're kind of, Google's great until it's not, and then you're on your own. And maybe Microsoft's that way, but we can at least complain.
Yes. Oh, and I did want to say, we were talking about videos and it made me think of something else I did. Once March 2020, when the pandemic hit, I decided to do a Google Voice phone number. That way I didn't have to give out my personal cell phone number, but I had a number that I could post in all of my Blackboard classes if somebody wants to text me, if they want to talk to me on the phone. And not that many of them took me up on it, but I had several say, thank you so much for sharing that, because they didn't want an email, or sometimes they don't want to watch a video, believe it or not. Sometimes they get tired of those too. So just the old fashioned, telephone, here's my number. And I know when somebody calls, it's a different ringtone. I know it's a work question or it's a student who needs help, but that's been successful too. And that was easy and something free that I could do.
Lots of good tips. And the biggest one is ask for help and ask students how you can be helpful, and
Yes.
Reach out to these instructional designers. I mean, we have some brilliant folks here. Vicky's really taken a lot of charge on some things, and we just have a lot of talent in the staff. So please leverage them.
And you were talking earlier about people feel like they're bothering you to ask for help. We get that too as instructional designers. Sometimes we'll be like, well, oh no, if you have time, like, oh, if you could possibly help. And we're like, that is exactly what we're here for. Like, I am here to help. So if you don't reach out to me, I don't know what help you need. So we always really encourage people to reach out, and, we might not be able to do it immediately, but, we work really well as a team. We can find an answer, that kind of stuff.
Yes, and I have to say, with EKUIT, with anyone who works at the IDC and anyone who works at the library, if I've ever asked a question, I have never been made to feel stupid or made to feel like I'm in imposition. We have the most helpful people on this campus. And that's one of the things that I love about working here, is that people are here to help me help my students. And I'm very grateful for that. So thank you all. And thank you for being here today. I really appreciate you taking the time. I know everybody's busy and we're waiting for the impending doom ice storm, to happen at any point. So thanks for, not being at Kroger right now or getting gas or groceries, and being online with me.
Well,
thank you, Chris.
I sure appreciate this. And I love the discussion and the ideas. If I go to one of these for myself, I think, man, if I can come home with one idea, and I've been doing this a while, and I've already gotten several. And, that immediacy concept was something I found out about early on and working with you all in another venue. And it's something that really stuck with me. And, I do instructional design, but there is instructional communication, which is this whole rich research-based branch of knowledge that's fascinating, and I think appreciated. And I think it's because not many people know about it. So thanks for bringing that knowledge today, Jennifer. And this video will be useful. We're building a new website, and each faculty member that does one of these online teaching and learning sessions for us is going to get a page with a quick synopsis video and the list of resources and this presentation. So thanks so much for being part of that. And thanks to you all today for your questions and interest, which always make the presentation special to me. So
Yes,
really appreciate it.
This was fun. Thank you guys. Thanks for being here.